Amrit. A story by legendary Hindi author Premchand. I was in the bloom of my youth when I first became acquainted with the pleasure of pain. For a while, I dabbled in poetry, and gradually, this interest turned into an obsession. I distanced myself from worldly connections and immersed myself in the world of poetry. Within just 3 years, my efforts unlocked the potential of my imagination. Sometimes, my poetry could rival the famous verses of the masters. My pen, teacher. My imagination, like a self-growing plant, thrived freely, unbound by the constraints of meter and rhyme, and my style was unique. I took my poetry beyond Persia, reaching Europe. This was my own distinctive style. In this field, I had neither a rival nor an equal. Despite my deep involvement in poetry, I despised the applause and praise that often accompanied poetic gatherings. However, I frequently engaged in discussions about the merits and flaws of my poetry with connoisseurs, without revealing my name. Although I did not claim to be a poet, my fame gradually spread, and when my Masnavi, Dunia-e-Husn, was published, it caused quite a stir in the literary world. The old poets had filled volumes with their work, stingy in receiving praise from critics, but my experience was entirely different. Sometimes, I was haunted by the thought that my admirers' generosity was a testament to the lack of creativity of other poets' pens. This thought was discouraging. Nevertheless, Dunia-e-Husn established me as the king of poetry. My name was on everyone's lips, and I was discussed in every newspaper. Fame brought wealth along with it. I had no other occupation day and night besides composing poetry. Often, nights would pass while I sat writing, and when a piercing verse emerged from my pen, I would leap with joy. Until now, I had been free from the bonds of marriage, or, rather, I was unfamiliar with its pleasures, which include both the bitterness of sorrow and the sweetness of joy. Like many Western writers, I believed that there was an old enmity between the intoxication of literature and the intoxication of beauty. I am embarrassed to admit that I lacked confidence in my nature. Whenever a captivating face would cross my mind, a kind of madness would overtake me. For weeks, I would remain in a daze, unable to focus on writing. My weak heart had room for only one love, and out of fear, I was compelled to keep my colorful nature in check. A lotus petal, a song of a dusky beauty, a lush field, these all had a magical attraction for me, but I could not view a woman's alluring beauty through the detached eyes of a painter or sculptor. To me, a beautiful woman was like a colorful, deadly serpent, pleasing to the eyes, but terrifying to the heart. 2 years had passed since the publication of Dunia-e-Husn. My fame continued to grow like a swollen river in the monsoon. It seemed as if I had cast a spell over the world of literature. During this time, I composed many scattered verses, but the flood of invitations and accolades stifled my deepest emotions. Publicity and fame may serve as a whip for a politician, but a poet's nature reveals its true brilliance only when seated quietly in a secluded corner. Consequently, I fled from these increasingly ridiculous affairs and hid in a secluded spot in the mountains. It was there that Nehring was born. As I began working on Nehring, I experienced a surprising and heartbreaking revelation. For reasons known only to God, my mind and thoughts seemed to be clouded. Despite hours of effort, I couldn't produce a single verse that stirred my heart. When ideas did come, they were poor and overused themes that my soul recoiled from. Often, I would get frustrated, tear up the paper, and in a state of deep disheartenment, wonder if my poetic power had come to an end. Had I exhausted the treasure that nature had given me for a lifetime so quickly? Where was that state where an abundance of ideas and the flow of delicate thoughts left no room for my pen to rest? Where was the time when the bird of imagination sought to become a star in the sky? And now, this decline. This pitiful poverty. But what was the cause of this? What crime was I being punished for? The world is another name for cause and effect. Until we find an answer to the question, why, our hearts cannot rest. Even death must answer this, why? Finally, I consulted a doctor. Like most doctors, he advised a change of environment. It also occurred to me that perhaps the cool climate of Nainital had dampened the fire of my poetry. I wandered continuously for 6 months, visiting many enchanting sights, but none of them evoked that poetic feeling in me that would overflow the cup and make silent imagination sing on its own. I could not find my lost treasure. Now I was weary of life. Life seemed like a dry desert where there was no vitality, no freshness, no interest. A constant sense of despair hung over my heart, and my mind felt lost. I wondered if those few days of moonlight had ended and the dark phase had begun. I was tired of human company, repulsed by the sight of my own kind, and spent my days in an obscure corner, waiting for my life to end. Can the birds that sing sweet songs while perched on treetops survive in a cage? They might eat the grain and drink the water, but there is no difference between their life and death. Finally, when I lost all hope of my poetry returning, I resolved that it would be better for me to die in the world of poetry. I was already dead. To consider myself alive in this state would be foolish. So, one day, I sent news of my death to some newspapers. As soon as the news was published, there was an uproar in the country, a great commotion. It was then that I realized the extent of my popularity. The general outcry was that the boat of poetry had sunk in midstream. The poetic gathering had been disbanded. Magazines and journals published my life stories, and after reading them, I had to admire the editors' creative minds. I was neither the son of a nobleman nor had I left behind a noble life to embrace poverty. Their imagination had overshadowed reality. One of my friends, who claimed to be close to me, portrayed me as a lover of drinking. Whenever he met me, he saw my eyes red with intoxication. However, later in the same article, he sincerely defended this bad habit of mine, arguing that a person who lived on dry bread could not compose such intoxicating verses. Nevertheless, I was amazed at how he had the courage to make such a blatant false statement. I didn't care much for these falsehoods. What truly concerned me, what intensely intrigued me was the verdict people would pass on my poetry. The true recognition of our life's work comes after death, for only then is it free from flattery and malice. Who cares about the joy or sorrow of the deceased? So I began reading the critiques of my poetry with a very calm heart. However, it seemed there was a famine of understanding when it came to grasping the depth of poetry. Most of the critics focused on individual verses, dissecting them thoroughly, and no doubt, as readers, they understood the nuances of those verses well. But there was no sign of a true critic. The depth of insight was missing. No critic emerged who could look at the entire poem as a whole and reach the deeper emotions. One day, I wandered out of the world of the dead and found myself in the public library of Ajmer. It was noon. I leaned over the table, looking for a new piece of writing to pass the time. Suddenly, my eyes fell on a beautiful journal titled Kalame-Akhtar. Like a child reaching for a toy, I quickly grabbed the book. Its author was Miss Aisha Arif, which piqued my interest even more. I sat down comfortably and began reading the book. After just one page, my interest turned into impatience. Then I was transported into a world of ecstasy. Before me, it seemed as if a river of subtle meanings was flowing. The elevation of imagination, the purity of taste, the softness of language, the poetic vision was such that my heart rejoiced. I would read a paragraph, then take a deep breath, overwhelmed by the freshness of thought, and then reflect on it. It was impossible to read this book superficially. Was this woman a mortal or the goddess of taste? Her critique spared very little of my work, but where she praised me, she showered pearls of truth. Her objections were sympathetic, and her praise was filled with devotion. Poetry should not be judged by its flaws. It is not right to measure what it lacks. I just wanted to kiss the author's hands and pen. A magazine was published by the Safir office in Bhopal. My resolve was firm. 3 days later, in the evening, I was walking on the lush green grass in front of Miss Aisha's beautiful bungalow. I entered a room with the maid. The decor was very simple. The first thing my eyes fell on was my portrait hanging on the wall. There was a mirror in front of it. For some reason, I glanced at my reflection. My face was pale and withered, my hair disheveled, and a thick layer of dust covered my clothes. I looked like a living picture of distress. At that moment, I was deeply ashamed of my appearance. I may not have been handsome, but at that moment, my face truly looked like it was scolding me. Feeling confident in our attire gives us joy. The impact of untidiness is felt more in the heart than on the body. We become timid and lose our courage. I had barely spent 5 minutes when Miss Aisha entered the room. Her complexion was dusky, her face glowing with a serious charm. Her large, narcissus-like eyes radiated decency and culture. She was slightly shorter than average, with a slender, well-proportioned figure so light and delicate that it seemed nature had created her not for this material world but for some imaginary realm. No painter could have drawn a better portrait of her. Miss Aisha glanced at me with shy eyes, but as she did, her neck lowered, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. Her eyes moved from the ground to my portrait on the wall and then to the curtain in front of her, as if she wished to hide behind it. Miss Aisha asked, with a shy glance towards me, "Are you one of the friends of the late Akhtar?" I replied with my head lowered, "I am the unfortunate Akhtar himself." Aisha, in a state of astonishment, stood up from her chair and, looking at me in disbelief, asked, "The author of Dunya-e-Husn? Who, besides superstition, has seen someone who has departed this world?" Aisha looked at me several times with skeptical eyes. Instead of the usual modesty and shyness, her gaze was now filled with astonishment. She couldn't believe that I had escaped from the grave. Perhaps she thought I was insane. She decided in her heart that I was a close relative of the deceased poet. The resemblance between the two faces was proof that they belonged to the same family. Maybe I was his brother. She thought I had gone mad from the sudden shock. Perhaps I had seen her book and had come to inquire about her. Suddenly, it occurred to her that someone might have given the newspapers false news of my death, and I hadn't had the chance to refute it. This thought eased her confusion, and she said, "A terribly tragic piece of news about you was published in the newspapers." I replied, "That news was true." If Aisha had any doubts about my mental state before, they were dispelled now. I briefly narrated my story, and when she was convinced that the author of Dunya-e-Husn, Akhtar, was indeed standing before her in human form, a faint blush of happiness appeared on her face. But this light color soon mixed with the bright hue of pride and self-respect, turning into something entirely different. Perhaps she was embarrassed that she had let her appreciation go too far. After a moment of shy silence, she said, "I'm sorry you felt the need to release such tragic news." Filled with enthusiasm, I replied, "There was no other way to receive praise from your pen. I could die many such deaths for this critique." My boldness freed Aisha's tongue from the restraints of propriety and modesty. She smiled and said, "I dislike pretense. Didn't the doctor say anything?" Her smile emboldened me to flirt a little, so I said, "Now, only the Messiah can cure this illness." Aisha understood the hint and laughed, saying, "The Messiah lives on the fourth heaven." My courage took another step forward. The fourth heaven is not far from the world of souls. The light shade of seriousness and unfamiliarity faded from Aisha's glowing face. However, seeing my bold hints go too far, she had to exercise some self-restraint to put a stop to my words. When I left the room about an hour later, instead of extending her hand in the customary English way, she stole a glance at me. When water, after spreading out, gathers and flows from one place, its force and speed increase manifold. Aisha's eyes had the power of modesty in them. Her heart smiled, and passion danced in them. There was a strong invitation in them for me. When I reached the Muslim hotel and reflected on these events, I concluded that although I appeared to be a stranger to her on the surface, I had perhaps reached the corner of her heart on a deeper level. When I lay down after eating, despite having stayed awake for 2 nights, sleep was nowhere near my eyes. How could one sleep in the turmoil of emotions? Aisha's image, her hospitality, and her covered glances were stirring up a storm of feelings in my heart. That final glance had sparked a whirlwind of desires within me. Those desires, long dead, had been awakened again, and with them, my imagination had opened its closed eyes. I felt a restless surge of emotions and inspiration within me. These desires, these restless emotions, and these struggles are the oil for the lamp of imagination. The warmth of feelings kindled my imagination. I picked up the pen and wrote a poem that I consider my greatest treasure. I was staying in a hotel, but by some means or another, I would make sure to enjoy her presence at least once a day. Although Aisha never bothered to come to me, I needed no proof to be sure that she eagerly awaited me, how her face would blossom like a lotus at the familiar sound of my footsteps, and how rays of desire would shine from her eyes. 6 months passed like this. This period should be considered the spring of my life. I also remember the days when I was free from the sorrows of desires and longings. But where is the joy of the dancing waves in the calm flow of the river? Now, if there was the pain of love, there was also the life-giving pleasure in it. If there was the bitterness of longing, there was also its zest. Ah, my thirsty eyes could never quench their thirst from the source of her beauty. When I looked at her with my intoxicated eyes, I felt a spiritual refreshment. I would become lost in the intoxication of seeing her, and my creative power knew no bounds. It felt as if a fountain of sweet emotions had sprung up in my heart. I was astonished at my poetic ability. As soon as I picked up the pen, a stream of creation began to flow. Though Nereng may not have high imagination or profound thoughts, each verse resonates with fluidity, emotion, warmth, and tenderness. It was the blessing of that lamp that had now been lit in my heart and was illuminating it. It was the fragrance of that flower that had blossomed in my heart. Love is the nourishment of the soul. It is the drop of nectar that revives dead emotions. Love is a spiritual blessing. It is the purest, highest, and most blessed grace in life. It was this elixir that I had unknowingly been seeking. That night will never be forgotten when Aisha, as a bride, entered my home. Nereng is the cherished memory of her blessed life. Dunya-e-Husn was a bud, Nereng is the blossomed flower, and what caused that bud to bloom? It was the very thing I had been unknowingly seeking and had finally found. This story was originally written by Premchand, a legendary author of Hindi literature over 100 years ago. Do let us know if you liked the story. If it so happens that you did not like the story, even then, please let us know your choice, so that we can find something for you would like. If you liked the story, why not share the sentiments with your friends? Also subscribe to easily find more stories like these from other Indian authors.